Thank you everybody for joining us. Today, IDSF is hosting in this webinar one of its esteemed members, Ambassador Danny Ayalon, who is very experienced, and talking with Ambassador Ayalon, we'll try to figure out really how what is happening in the war between Russia and Ukraine is impacting the Middle East and is impacting the relations also around the Middle East between the main powers. Of course, we'll try to also give you an update of what is happening on the ground in this war between Russia and Ukraine, how it's affecting the Iranian issue, and what is Israel's role in all of that. So maybe Ambassador Ayalon, maybe we'll open up by, if you can give us an overview, looking at the US and European interests versus Russia and then China, what is going on the global level?
Well, thank you. First of all, Amir, it's great to be on the same setting here with you. An honor to share this platform, and of course the IDSF. I very much value this organization and its contribution to understanding better the geopolitical situation and of course Israel's interests. Amir, with your permission, let me start with an anecdote. In 2001, I was the foreign policy advisor of Ariel Sharon. Ariel Sharon was just elected just a few months before that, and 9/11 happened. After 9/11, the ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all those guys, they put a list of reasons why they attacked the Twin Towers in Washington. Of course, they hate the West, their way of living and values and all in between. And number 4 on their list was America's support for Israel. And they were pushing on not just ISIS, but Al-Qaeda, but the Arab countries from all over the Middle East started pushing on Europe and on the United States to keep the pressure on Israel to give up to the Palestinians. That day, Ariel Sharon came up with what is called the Czechoslovakia speech. He said in a speech, basically, Israel will not be Czechoslovakia. There was a lot of uproar, especially in Washington. I got a lot of calls from Condoleezza Rice and from others in Washington. She was at that time the National Security Advisor. Please rescind this speech. If you say Israel will not be Czechoslovakia, it's like Bush is like a Chamberlain, or the United States is going to give in to terrorism and to brutal murder and murderers. And Sharon did not want to do that. After a while, the pressure dissipated. Now, if I take this experience to what happened with the Ukraine, who were begging for international support, which did not come, still is hardly coming, the lesson from the Ukraine war, Russia-Ukraine war, is that Israel cannot rely on anybody, certainly not on the international community, who is always either too late or doing nothing. We know our people have experienced, the most abominable human experience in the Shoah, where we lost the Holocaust, when we lost 6 million of our people, 1/3 of the people. Why? Because we were defenseless, because we did not have our own home in our own home state in Israel. And this is not unique to Jews. People in countries that cannot defend themselves are being brutalized and nobody helps them. We talked about Czechoslovakia, we can talk about the Austria and the Anschluss in 1938 and so on and so forth, all the way until now. The people of Syria that cannot defend themselves, millions have been either uprooted and almost 1 million was killed. This is the lesson. Only a people, a country that can defend itself by itself can survive in this very, very difficult international surrounding. Unfortunately, today, in the 21st century, the law of the jungle still prevails. And we see it again and again and again everywhere. So this is a lesson that we must always remember. And it's not just a matter of having the objective capability, which Israel does, but also the will and determination to apply it and to use it. And if I can jump straight, Amir, to the nexus between the Ukraine war and Iran, Iran can learn also something from that they can be aggressive, that they can attack, and the international community may give some condemnations here and there, maybe sanctions, but that's it. And we have to be very focused now on Iran more than before, because the Iranians can use all the attention that is given now to the Ukraine and the Russian war to continue and move forward with their illegal and very dangerous military nuclear program and ambitions. They may do one of two things. They may try to expedite the signing.
Danny, before you talk about what the Iranians will do, there is something that I think it's difficult to understand. I mean, we see the Western world standing, maybe not militarily, but talking about sanctions, being able to pose on Russia huge sanctions, and try to stop Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Yet when we're talking about the Iranians, probably the most evil regime in this globe, who is terrorizing all the Middle East, who is weaponizing militias, who is threatening to annihilate, to destroy Israel completely, and the world is not willing to impose the sanctions. Not only that, they want to sign an agreement basically that enables Iran to be a nuclear power and gives it hundreds of billions of dollars, which will be used to weaponize all these militias and go to war with Israel. Why is that? Why do you think that the US and Europe are pushing forward such a policy?
Well, I'm afraid that they do not want to be bothered by it. They want to push, just to kick the can down the road, so it will be for future generations or future administrations to deal with it. They just don't have the wherewithal in terms of determination to do it. I think it's very myopic. They think of the day-to-day, and they don't want to be bothered. It's a very complex issue. By the way, another side effect that we can learn from the Ukraine-Russia war is that sanctions, can be imposed in a much different way that they were imposed on Iran. Iran, during all the time of the sanctions, even during the Trump administration, they were not expelled from the SWIFT, from the international banking system. There were many things that they could still do. And unfortunately, that helped them survive. Although they were very weakened, they were on the bridge of, on the verge of a economic collapse, but still they survived. And now lifting the sanctions, if they sign the agreement, is going to, just infuse hundreds of billions of dollars to Iran. What are they going to do with this? They're going to elaborate and make their systems much harder. The nuclear infrastructure harder, deeper. They can continue to connive and cheat as they have been cheating and have been caught red-handed cheating. They will continue to do that, and they will continue to very out in the open, since the issue of ballistic missiles is not part of the agreement. They will continue to develop ballistic missiles intercontinental ones that can reach every spot on this globe. Already, they have ballistic missiles that can reach Europe, can reach Israel. They're working on even extended range, and they can do it freely. And they will also work on perfecting a warhead for this, which will be very easy for them once the JCPOA, once this agreement is over, which is by very few years, 8 years from now. Then it will be very easy for them to catch up. They have all the knowledge already. They have the know-how. It's just a matter of a decision for them to prepare a nuclear warhead. And this is
basically in 8 years, they can enrich as much enrichment as they want and be ready to prepare hundreds of nuclear warheads.
Absolutely. And you know what?
It's a complete surrender. The West is saying we are willing that Iran, this crazy regime, will be able to have hundreds of nuclear warheads. Now, obviously, if this happens, all the Middle East will start a race for nuclear weapons. We will see it in Egypt, in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf states.
Turkey.
And of course, the Iranians under this umbrella will storm all the Middle East. I mean, you know, when we're looking at what is going on now, the Iranians are building a force of hundreds of thousands of rockets and UAVs and the missiles. And we assess that once that this force, in their eyes, is ready, they will attack. They will attack Israel. They're saying that. I mean, we need to start listening to what this kind of regimes say. The Russians have been saying for years, that Ukraine is not a state, that this is part of Russia, and so on. And you know, they did their move with the Crimea at the time, 8 years ago, but they were always saying all the time, this will go on. So we see Iran building a force with tens of thousands of rockets in Gaza, with more than 100,000 rockets in Lebanon. Just to understand the scale, 10 years ago in Lebanon, you had 50 UAVs. Now there is 2,000. Now imagine 100 UAVs storming the border of Israel towards Haifa, which is not far away, towards our main port. It's enough that one of them succeeds to arrive, and they can sink a ship. They can attack military installations, and so on. And this is only talking about UAVs. I'm not talking about the missiles and the rockets, which they have huge amount.
And you know, Amir, from a policy point of view, there's another lesson that the Iranians are learning, is that if you have a nuclear capability, you have immunity. Nobody will touch you. Look at North Korea. If you give up nuclear ability, you know, Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons. They voluntarily gave it up in 1994. They voluntarily gave it up, and in return, they got assurances from the West that they will come to defend them. And of course, this will not happen. The same thing is with Libya. Libya, under Gaddafi, we know also they tried an illegal infrastructure to build nuclear weapons. Fortunately, some Western intelligence services found it in advance, and they were taken out of Libya, and Gaddafi is gone. So Iran is that, if the Iranians wanted so much to have nuclear weapons, now they're going to do it on the double. And for them, nuclear weapon is not just an end goal. It's a means to control the Middle East and beyond. A nuclear weapon will also strengthen their own position vis-a-vis their own people, you know, and will give them more legitimacy as protectors of the Shia and the Shia Islamists and the Iranian heritage and all that. This is something that we just cannot allow. And I think that the message is, since Israel cannot evidently stop the running into an agreement, the message should be and it is, Israel is not part of the agreement. Israel, of course, doesn't see it being, committed to this, and Israel will have to develop its own options to neutralize a military or a nuclear potential of Iran.
So I want to tell you something, as somebody that was a general in the army, and for 3.5 years, I oversaw some of these preparations against Iran. People have to understand, I mean, first of all, Israel is preparing. I mean, we understand that we are alone, just as Ukraine should have understood that they are alone. And we understand that we need to take our future in our hands. And the army is preparing, and the Mossad is preparing for a military option. But we have to understand what a military option means. I mean, Iran is not by chance building all these militias around us in Iraq, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and even mobilizing Israeli Arabs when they can. They are doing that as a means of deterring us from attacking. And if we attack, we have to take in account for sure that the retaliation that we'll see is a war with Lebanon, Gaza, and shooting probably also from Iraq and Yemen. So basically, it's not enough that the IDF prepares the Air Force or the intelligence or some special units to deal with Iran. What it means is the whole Israeli defense establishment, because of what is going on, needs to prepare for war. We need to prepare for a very big scale war, which we can encounter in 3 different scenarios. One scenario is that we attack. We have to destroy this Iranian capability. If we see that they're moving towards a bomb, we'll need to attack. And then obviously it's war. The other option is that we don't attack, we wait, and then if sanctions are relieved and the Iranians are able to move very fast forward with the build of force. I want to explain what it means. Today, they are trying to bring to Hezbollah as many missiles as possible. These missiles are very precise and can hit headquarters, can hit the Air Force bases, and they want to achieve a certain amount of missiles to feel that they're ready for war. Now we are slowing this process in coordination with the Russians in Syria. And but let's say there is 100% effort, we managed to stop 70%, and 30% is there is a buildup. We are not able to stop this completely. But if you relieve sanctions, and now they bring 10 times more, the 30% of tomorrow is the 100% of today. So it means that even if we manage to stop 70%, but the 30% tomorrow is a huge amount, and this will bring the Iranians to a capability within 6 months, a year and a half, a capability and the feeling that they're ready to attack. Now, if they see complete unwillingness of the West, apart of talking, to do something about it, nobody is stopping them. I mean, the Russians are backing them up. The Chinese are backing them up. The Middle East is not going to do anything, and we're left alone to deal with this notion of a war that is building. So really, we're in a big dilemma, because the question is, okay, what do? We wait until there is a huge war they initiate, or we take action and we attack first, like in the 6-day war. And
well, I think, well, Amir, as a general, I'm sure you, I mean, you would know it better than anybody, that it makes a big difference whether you keep the initiative or when you wait to absorb. And we have the two great examples you mentioned. 6 days war, we did not wait for them to come and kill us. I mean, they were all around us, but we initiated. I mean, we had the very good legitimacy. We had the casus belli was that all the Arab countries were surrounding us and putting all their, just like the Russians did in the Ukraine. Instead of waiting for them to attack and kill us, we attacked first. In 73, we were waiting for them to attack, and we saw the difference. We almost, lost our country. So we know that we cannot wait for Iran to have the capabilities, because we know once they have the capabilities, the nuclear ones, they will use it. They say that they want to eliminate Israel, and we believe them. They are really dead serious about it. The Islamist regime, the Ayatollah regime in Iran, is the most dangerous one, the most evil one. Hopefully, we will see a regime change, but we cannot count on that. So this is why we have to prepare the capability. I think it would be not just our responsibility, although we may be the only ones who have to do it, but I think it would be very, very much the interest of NATO, the interest of the United States to stop Iran, because if Iran becomes nuclear, they are completely immune. They can continue with terror, even 10 times more than they do now. They will, of course, threaten everyone in the region. They can dictate oil prices, and they can stop shipment, and shipping and navigation freedom in the Straits of Hormuz, and nobody can do anything because they will have this impunity of the nuclear. So it's not just Israel's interest to stop them from being nuclear. It's not just Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries and Egypt and it's also European. It's also the US. I would also say it's Russia and China. Everybody's. But unfortunately today, politicians today, they think short term. They think how they get elected. They think how they can really finish their term without any ruffles or too much fiascos, and that's it. And we need people like Churchill who are thinking long term, who are willing to really bite the bullet and do what needs to be done today.
Yeah, we need leaders like that, and we need generals like that are not dovish and hawkish and understand that
absolutely
time to attack.
And we
see some interesting developments in the last few days. First of all, our chief of staff, Kochavi, he visited the Gulf states. He was in Bahrain, and we know that he also met with the Qatarian chief of staff, which this is a big deal. I mean, Qatar wasn't a very good friend of ours, but now we see a buildup of relations, and everybody is worried about the Iranians. So obviously, we see a huge change. Who would have imagined, the chief of staff of Israel meeting with chief of staffs of Bahrain, Qatar, all the cooperation we have with the UAE and so on. Today, by the way, we met with the representative of the Turkish embassy. I mean, there is no ambassador at the moment, but the guy in charge. And Turkey is a very interesting development. I mean, it seems that they are also understanding that they need to change policy. We saw our president's visit. It was a very impressive visit in Turkey. And the Turks did everything they can to convey the message. They want to do business with us.
And Israel has become a major player in the Middle East, not just militarily, strategically, and technologically, as we have always been in the last, let's say, 20, 30 years, but also in terms of energy, since we have found in our economic waters in the Mediterranean lots of gas, and probably in the deep water also a lot of oil. But also politically, we have become very influential. And indeed, we have today two alliances, one which is the Western Alliance, I call it, with Cyprus and Greece, and the Eastern one is with the Gulf countries, the Abraham Accord. And I think this gives us a lot of leverage. And the fact, I think it's a very, very positive development that Erdogan and Turkey is now seeking to better relations with Israel. It was their initiative, not Israel's initiative, and it's because of Israel's strength. And
what do the Turks want? What do you think they want?
Well, see, when Erdogan took office in 2002, he almost single-handedly changed the entire foreign policy of Turkey and its strategic relations with Israel. You see, Turkey and Israel, until Erdogan, were strategic allies, and it makes sense. We have a lot of common interests. By the way, with Iran, before the Islamic revolutions, also we had very good relations, because there is this triangle of three non-Arab countries in the Middle East, only three non-Arab countries, which is Israel, Iran, and Turkey. Iran and Turkey are Muslims, but not Arabs. And we had very good strategic cooperation until in 1979, the Ayatollahs came, you know, the Islamists, and until 2002, the Islamists of the Sunni type of Erdogan. You know, Erdogan, basically his party, the AKP, is the same ideology as of Hamas and the
Muslim Brotherhood,
and the Muslim right and the Muslim Brotherhood. And he tried in the beginning really to actually to encroach on Israel's influence. He's supporting Hamas. He was inciting Israel and using a lot of their influence to undermine Israel's connection with the Temple Mount, you know, in Jerusalem. He was trying also to encroach on our economic waters, you know, with the Cyprus and Greece on the gas, on the energy things. And because of the very, very stiff resistance from Israel, the alliance with Cyprus and Greece, that kept Turkey, Erdogan, at bay. And coupled with that, of course, is the economic problems that he has, the isolation, you know, the political isolation. You know, Turkey today has a problem of human rights. And there are more journalists that are incarcerated in prison in Turkey than any other country in the world. Biden did not return Erdogan's call for a month after he was elected. Erdogan needs, you know, the United States. So I guess his move towards warming relations with Israel, you know, he wants to, with an eye to Washington, he wants to better relations with the United States. He wants Israeli technology, Israeli tourism. He said it. And of course, breaking up the isolation that he has. So this is a good sign that Israel has become a real major influencer in the region.
So what we are seeing basically is the need, especially talking about the withdrawal of the US from Afghanistan and the fact that the US wants to be less involved in the Middle East. And you know, when one power goes out, new powers come in. And we see the Russians who are more influential. We see the Chinese going into Iran and trying to reach out to the Middle East to build a Silk Way all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And I think there is an understanding in the Gulf states, in Turkey, the Sunni states, that if they want to stand in front of these powers and really be able to affect this region, they need to ally themselves with Israel. Without Israel, they have no capability to really make a difference, certainly not talking about the Chinese and not the Russians. So from an aspiration of power in the Middle East, this is something that brings us together. But as you said, Danny, there is also the issue of the gas. You know, Europe 40% of the gas Europe uses is from Russia. Now they are sanctioning that. They need something else. And Israel has huge amounts of gas, which can be brought into Europe. The pipeline from Israel to Greece seems to be problematic. They're having technical problems how to do it. And the other option is Turkey. And obviously Turkey is very, very interested. They would like a pipe from Israel to Turkey and from Turkey to Europe. And this, of course, there's a huge potential for Israel, talking about how influential Israel is becoming in Europe now, because now suddenly Europe needs gas from Israel. Who would have thought about that, 20 years ago? Israel will sell Europe gas. It's inconceivable. And also talking about the need in NATO to build an army. They were caught by surprise. There is no army in Europe. Germany with 50 tanks, Britain with 150. So what we are seeing now, every week, in the last few weeks, we see all our military industries flying to East Europe and North Europe, signing huge agreements. And one of the things that when the Turks look at it, they say, okay, we are part of NATO. Israelis are now bringing the best of their know-how and technology to Czechoslovakia, to Poland, to Finland, to Sweden, and Romania, and so on. What about us? I mean, how can we be left outside? I mean, we'll be less equipped and less advanced than other NATO armies. So obviously they cannot, stay behind, and they're pushing forward and moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think another maybe lesson from the Russia-Ukraine war is that we should never accept international peacekeeping forces to defend us. If you recall, there are different suggestions to put UN or even Western countries troops on the Jordan River, or the Jordan area, and we must
Valley,
we must rely only on Israeli military. I think we are very proud that we can defend ourselves by ourselves. And our best friend and ally, of course, has been and will be the United States. I think there is a natural alliance, sharing values and interests. But there's one thing I think that makes Israel unique among all American allies in the world, is that Israel has never asked for American boys and girls to be put in harm ways for us. Unlike all the other American partners, in NATO, there are, Americans in NATO, or in Korea, or in Japan, Okinawa, or anywhere else, except, or of course, they have American bases in the Gulf, whether it's in Qatar or the UAE, but not in Israel, because we have always said, all we need is the American material and weapons. Other than that, we can defend ourselves by ourselves, and I think it has worked very well. By the way, another maybe side effect from the war is that military equipment is going to be in demand all over the world, especially anti-ballistic missile, defense systems like the Arrow, like the Iron Dome, cyber capabilities. And here, both the United States and Israel are, at the forefront and at the cutting edge. So that can, by default, not by design, can help a lot of military equipment exports from Israel and the United States. It will, Israel has always been the best salesman for American military, because they see what we can do with it, and that's what other countries wanted. If you recall, Amir, in the first Lebanon war, peace of frugality, 1982. If you recall, in one day, Israeli Air Force shot down like 92 Russian-made Syrian fighter jets that killed the Russian military industry sales and increased the Americans. 1970, in an encounter between Israeli Air Force and the Russian Air Force, it was 5-0. 5 Russian planes were shot down by Israelis over the Suez Canal in 1970. So even now, we see the results. So far, the performance of the Russian military in Ukraine is pretty bad. And of course, it's bad for the population, because the more frustrated Putin is, the more aggressive he will become and shooting down on civilians. And this is very, very bad. What will the West do now if this bombing of civilians continues? Remains to be seen.
Yeah, so maybe I'll give a short update about what's going on in Ukraine. So there's a big debate how the Russians are, operating at the moment in Ukraine. I think that one of the wrong understandings about the Russians is that people were saying, okay, the Russians started going into Ukraine. They failed. They didn't manage to conquer Ukraine in 2 days. So first of all, you cannot conquer a country of thousands of kilometers with ground forces in 2 days, okay? It takes weeks. This is one thing. The other thing is that I can say as a general that knows what is fighting on the ground, that when the Russians went in, it was clear to me that they are not intending to move fast. They didn't use the massive Air Force attacks. They didn't use artillery. They didn't use a huge amount of rockets. And I think that the way the Russians are handling themselves, I think that Putin, first of all, he put all this army on the border, and he was expecting the US and Europe and also Zelensky to say, okay, we understand this is serious. Let's negotiate, and we understand that Ukraine needs to be under Russian umbrella. But this didn't happen. Then he said, okay, maybe they didn't understand me well. He started maneuvering. He didn't want to do a very big maneuver at the beginning. He just went in and then waited to see what's happening. Again, he was expecting Ukraine, first of all, but also the West, to say, okay, guys, we understand that you are serious. Let's negotiate and let's find a solution where Ukraine is part of Russia in some way. But also this didn't happen. But what did happen is that Europe was so shocked by seeing, 12,000 tanks storming towards the West, and their inability to react to this militarily, and they reacted very, very strongly with sanctions to such an extent that at that stage, Putin has nothing to lose. Yeah. I mean, the only thing he can do is move forward. And the way he's moving forward is not utilizing a lot of statistic weapons like artillery and so on. And this, it means that he has more casualties, but he's willing to have more casualties and not shoot and get thousands of citizens killed. He's going around cities, closing on them, creating hunger, despair. He wants the society and the Ukrainian military to break psychologically. He wants people to move out of Ukraine. And he wants to go in only when people are really in the stage that they feel they cannot fight anymore. It's very obvious that he sees huge importance in controlling the Azov Sea and the Black Sea. I mean, he's moving in a way that at the end of the day, maybe in a week or two, he will have full control of all the exits to the sea. Ukraine won't have any more exit to the Azov Sea or to the Black Sea. And this is in a way devastating for Central and East Europe and North Europe, because most of the trade is done through Odessa. Odessa is a very, very important port. And at the moment, it's the only port he didn't conquer yet. Also in Mariupol, there's still a huge fight, but eventually it seems like he's going to conquer Mariupol. Once he conquers Mariupol, he's connecting all the Donbas area, this Russian-dominated area, with Crimea, and then from there towards Odessa, and that's it. All the sea will be in Russian hands. And at the same time, we see his forces closing on Kiev, attacking the neighbors on the outskirts of Kiev. He almost managed to close Kiev completely. I don't know what will happen with Zelensky in the next few days, because if the Russians continue forward, either he will need to leave Kiev to some other safe place, or stay and fight inside Kiev. We need to see what his decision will be. But it seems like the Russians, at least all of Eastern Ukraine, they want to get hold of Eastern Ukraine. And in Ukraine, the East is the heart of Ukraine. You know, from Kiev into the East, Odessa into the East, this is really the heart of the land, because this is the area that is connected to the sea and to the main river and so on. So I think that while there is a tendency in the West to all the time say that the Russians are not successful, they have logistic problems, they have different kind of problems, the reality is that the Russians are moving forward all the time. I haven't seen one meaningful, successful counterattack by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are brave, they're fighting for their land, and what's happening there is a real tragedy. But at the moment, I cannot see anything that is stopping the Russians from moving forward, and nobody is putting any idea that will appease Putin. Mm-hmm. It seems like they're fighting to the end. And if they do that, actually, it's hard to say that it might be the end for Ukraine. Because if Russians get hold of all of this eastern part, they might, in the long term, bring Russians from Russia into this area, change the society, make it Russian, get millions of other people outside of Ukraine, and this won't be the same country anymore. Yeah. So, you know, the decisions they are taking here, they're very, very serious for the long term. And talking about Israel, we are now experiencing tens of thousands of Jews who are fleeing Ukraine and coming to Israel, but also from Russia. We're talking about maybe in the coming year, 100 to 200,000 Jews that are making Aliyah. This is a very big deal for us.
Which will be great, actually. You know, the Russian Jews who came here in the 90s, you know, 1.1 million. I think they have changed the country to the better, and part of the Israeli high-tech industry success is also because of them. Demographically, of course, they were, you know, helping us. And Israel today is a 10 million people country. So this is something that is very, very meaningful. If some of our enemies thought back in 1948, when we were reestablished, that you know, it's something which is very, very precarious and will not live long, we are showing that we are here forever and ever. Why? Because this is our home. And when you are at home and you're willing to defend it, you're successful. And we'll continue to do that. So I believe, Amir, if we have a few 100,000 more immigrants from Ukraine and Russia, I think it will be very good. It's not going to be easy in terms of, you know, a lot of logistical and financial strains on the government, but it is very much worthwhile.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for Israel, and that's to understand how complicated all of this is. You know, if you go to the most popular app that deals with selling houses in Israel, and you do the broadest research you can, trying to understand how many houses are being sold in Israel at the moment, you will probably find 60,000, 70,000, something like that. So when you talk about 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 Jews that are coming into Israel, this requires a huge infrastructure. Oh. And this is an opportunity for us to build the Negev and build the Galil and build Judea and Samaria, and not concentrate everybody just in Tel Aviv or in the center of Israel. Yesterday, the government of Israel decided to build a new city in the Negev, which intends to be a Haredi city. There were also decisions taken before to build 12 new towns in the Negev. And there are decisions to build towns in the Golan Heights. So a lot of talking, not enough doing. And now we can say that, you know, we need to move from talking to really making Zionism and building new towns and in the Golan and the Galil and the Negev and Judea and Samaria. And I think this is going to happen. I mean, we have no choice. We have many Jews coming in. Absolutely. And this will boost, as it did, as you said, Danny, at the time. Million Russians that came boosted the Israeli economy dramatically.
And also culturally and everything. And of course, we have to mention also the Ethiopian Aliyah, you know, about 120,000 right, which also was very beneficial for Israel and the Israeli society. Every Jew counts from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, definitely. So on one hand, you know, we see a terrible war and terrible suffering of the Ukrainian people. It's affecting us in different ways. Some of them, by the way, are beneficial to Israel. Others are big dangers because the world is not concentrating on the Iranian issue. Everybody is talking about Ukraine and not about the huge danger of Iran. But we understand what we are facing. And, you know, one of the questions was why talk about it? Why say we are going to attack? Well, the message is not to Iran. The message is to the Western world. The message is, look, you can surrender. We are not going to surrender. We are going to make sure that this Jewish state thrives. And the West needs to understand what it means not to back us up, and what the consequences will be. So looking at the US, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, first of all, it will be interesting, and I'm sure many Americans are interested to see what will happen in November in Congress and Senate. What kind of Congress and Senate we'll have in November? This might have an influence of what is happening. And the other question is, what will be in the next elections in the States, providing that we can wait for 2 years and see what happens.
Right.
I'm not sure we have 2 years, but if we do, I think that probably the next elections in the US will be the most important elections Israel has ever had. And we need America strong. We need Churchills, not Chamberlains. We need America to play its role as a world leader. And I'm really hoping that this will happen. So, Danny, we're in the last 5 minutes and we want to keep the time. So please, your final remark.
So first of all, I think all of us in Israel our hearts go out to the Ukrainians, to the brave Ukrainians that defend their freedom, defend their land, defend their home. Do they have a chance against this mighty Russian army? I'm not sure, because as you mentioned, Amir, and you know it from a military perspective, the Russians do have the power to do it. Maybe it will take them a long time, but if they continue to bombard and kill civilians, I think this is horrible. I think these are war crimes. And here the West cannot stand aside and stand idle or look the other way, because this is not the war about the Ukraine. It's a war about the world order. It's if Ukraine is not getting help, then any dictator can think in the future that they can take on other countries, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's Moldova or Baltic states or anything else, or even Iran. Iran, they eye the countries of Bahrain. If they feel like there's no world order and the international community is not standing by the attacked, why wouldn't Iran go and attack Bahrain or UAE or anything else? So I think it's high time. It's a dilemma, because I can understand why the Americans and NATO say, well, we're not going to impose right now a no-fly zone. We're not going to send troops because this might start a third world war. I'm not sure that this is the case, but if they do not show some seriousness, then there is no deterrence whatsoever, and the Russians will continue until they annihilate Ukraine altogether. So at some point, there should be a red line where the West, the NATO, will put the dilemma on the Russians. Right now, the dilemma is NATO, whether to intervene or not. And the Russians feel, Putin feels when he's told, we're not going to intervene militarily, he feels that he has the free hand and he will continue. So at some point, you will have to face red lines, and this is the way to do it.
So I think that we see a changing world. We see powers that are challenging the US and the West. And Israel, at the end of the day, the Israeli government has the responsibility to defend the Israeli people and the Jewish people and to take care of our national security. And in this sense, I think that we'll have to be very alert and navigate in this turbulent sea between different powers. And we'll have to see in the future how things evolve. Israel is in a very delicate position. We have the Russians on our northern border, not only affecting what we are doing in Syria, but also can affect our capability to deal with the Iranians. So obviously we're keeping good relations with the Russians. We have, of course, a huge alliance with the US, and we have good relations with India and other countries, and we need to keep these channels open. We need to have good relations with many countries as possible, and keep Israel safe, not only for the sake of Israelis, but mainly for the sake of the Jewish people. Because at the end of the day, we see when the things get tough, Jews need a home. And Israel is the home of all of the Jews. Jews in Russia understand that, Jews in Ukraine understand that. And at any time, I can tell you as a general that always will be willing to risk our lives to save any Jew anywhere on this globe. So we'll try and keep Israel safe for the Jewish people. And thank you very much for being with us on this webinar. We are looking forward for the next time talking about these important issues of national security. Danny, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. And good night.
Last word, Amir, is Am Israel Chai. We are at home,
definitely,
our home, ancestral home.
And Chag Purim Sameach, of course, to all Jews around the world.
Of course.
Thank you very much.